think this is a kind of, for me, an unusual audience in the sense that often the audiences that I talk to about this probably need a little bit of a light shining on the whole concept of sort of nimble innovation, R&D, failing a lot of the time. I'm not so sure I need to spend that much time on that subject in this audience. So maybe you'll just enjoy, and sort of resonate with the journey that I'll share with you in a second. So my background, I was actually, weirdly enough, I was 15 years working for an oil major as an oil trader. But I've had a long history of I suppose, being unable to resist the temptation of going after unusual and interesting challenges, whether that's taking stuff apart and breaking things and making things, or I even spent 6 years in the Royal Marines Reserve. That seemed like an interesting challenge at the time and turned into a really bigger challenge than I thought. But I guess those kind of subjects encapsulate what fascinates me, which is, yes, technology, of course, but also the capability of the human being, the capability of the human mind and body. So, you can see anywhere you like now online examples of what the human body can do. So, for instance, like these young kids doing kind of parkour or some of the calisthenics street kind of training stuff. I was quite inspired by that. I thought, wow, it's amazing. You can train your body to hold a flag or do a one-arm pull-up or something. That's amazing. And I guess that was part of the starting inspiration about 18 months, 2 years ago, to take that idea and say, could you, frankly, for no other reason than for fun, reimagine the way flight could occur if you started with the human mind and body and you added some technology to that? Very distinctly different than building a flight machine, albeit a very special one, and then putting the human in it. It's a subtle difference. So, and there was a longer backstory to this around actually engaging some of the major muscle groups and deflecting a wing surface, but that's for another time. We haven't got enough time to cover that. Anyway, according to the philosophy that I've always adopted, you have that idea, even if it's a little bit crazy, don't tell too many people about it, and try and identify the very first thing you can go and do to make that idea start to become real. So you start prototyping. And for us, fairly quickly, that became, well, we need to get some decent horsepower from somewhere, and it needs to be pretty awesome, power to weight ratio, so gas turbines. So I'll show you a little clip in a minute of the very first instance that we got one of these things and started playing around with it. But just before then, there's quite a cool little clip of my training partner in London. I say training partner, I'm flying around all over the place now. I get hardly any time to do any actual training now. Most of my training is gripping onto these crazy engines. Hopefully this will work. First test of the slides. Denton in London, he's doing a good example, in the case you needed any examples, of some of the strength and control and balance that the human body can go and be taught to deliver. So that was part of the inspiration. On to the more fun bit. So hopefully this should be... Turn them down a bit. We're going to get used to that when we're outside. This was my ground zero. This was 1 micro gas turbine. So they're about 1.8 kilos. It's great talking to a UK audience finally for the last few weeks, so I have to keep thinking about pounds. So it's 1.8 kilos, and it puts out about 22, 23 kilos of thrust. It was so compelling that it kind of ticked off a whole load of reasons why we should carry on, because there was a bunch of reasons that we were concerned around in terms of heat and in inertia, in terms of stability. All of this stuff proved absolute rubbish. If you just have the kind of balls to strap one to your arm and have a go, it turns out to be fine. So we did that, and then obviously we got another one. Yeah, there we go. So now this is 2. It's a good memory test for me as well. So this is 2 now jumping around in a field. This was quite fun because suddenly you've actually got a little bit of balance. And as I've said before with this slide, if you look closely, you won't be able to see at the back. So there's a woman doing some allotment work in the very back of the shop. And this is a friend's garden, large garden. And yeah, she tries to ignore what we were doing. But you can kind of see, again, that dismissed a whole load of assumptions why this wouldn't be possible. This was actually pretty cool, and I could start to feel this, best part of 45, 50 kilos of lift. Guess what? We went and doubled it, and that, if you think about it, that's getting close to 100 kilos of thrust. And when you add up the weight of all the kit and me being about 73, 75 kilos, that's getting really close. And you can see I'm really barely coming back down again. But we need a little bit more power. So you can see the iterative steps we went through. Yeah, so this is a good example of something that didn't really work, which I will admit looks a little bit like you see in the early Ironman film. We didn't do this to build an Ironman suit. This was just accidental. But you can see there, we thought it would be quite fun to have a sort of tether to try and provide some balance and stability. Actually, it was a disaster. It created a variable vector from the center of my mass, which, according to how I flew it around, kept on yanking me all over the place. So we went back to forgetting tethers and just me hoping I'd managed to learn it quickly. So that was... Oh, this is another good example of learning from failure. I'm sure you've got a poster saying that somewhere. This was pinching fuel lines. Yeah, that's not to be repeated. This was a ridiculous idea. We needed more power, so let's just put 3 on each arm. So this is now 75 kilos of thrust on each arm, which was ridiculous, but looked quite cool. This is now an example of starting to make some really quite credible progress. This was an engine on each leg and 2 on each arm. We had enough power on paper, but it was about me trying to learn how to kind of manage this. And you can see it's getting closer and closer and closer, tantalizingly. And then I think this was the moment when we did the very first flight. This was a 6-second, reasonably coherent flight. You can see by the look on my face from those in the front. That was pretty cool. That was the moment when it suddenly dawned on me that actually this really was manageable. Now, having them on the bottom of the, on the lower legs was fun, but it didn't really work very well. There's a bunch of reasons why. I mean, it would dig huge holes in the ground. Even concrete got damaged by the engines. And if you sucked in the exhaust from the arm engines, you'd just gently melt all the turbine blades out, so that wasn't ideal either. So we gradually shuffled the engines higher, but we didn't stop learning from falling over. Everybody loves the falling over pictures. That was trying 3 fuel tanks, and the middle one, guess what, drained twice as quick as the other 2, and that ran out and some air went in the engines and threw me on the ground, in front of Red Bull that time. This is now, as you can see from various of these clips, this has now kind of progressed onto a really quite neat place. Even the system we're going to hopefully demonstrate shortly is evolved from all but 2 of these clips. It's kind of a constant process of learning, hopefully not so much from falling over, but ever-present possibility. Even from last week, I was flying in LA and San Diego last week, and then Germany at the weekend. And there's a whole bunch of really quite neat little demonstrations of A, the maneuverability, and B, the speed. There's one on a runway. Oh, that was last week in San Diego. Yeah, you can see the stability. It's kind of nuts, and that's just, from somebody who can't even skateboard, that's just my brain learning to do this in a coherent way. The speed, again, that I was getting up to, they wanted me to keep on the runway rather than go over the grass. The speed there, I was, getting really quite carried away. It's 1,000 horsepower, this system, so once you've stopped fighting gravity and you're starting to actually entertain horizontal, flight, it's pretty quick. This journey, as I say, started with just this kind of slightly mad vision around could you reimagine flight, and then did the thing which you guys, as I say, it's your bread and butter, about just learning from many, many failures and not being afraid to repurpose other technology and inspiration from other ideas. I almost deliberately didn't engage with the aeronautical engineering community. My father was one, and I don't have anything against that community, but I deliberately wanted to not be told what couldn't be done, and I wanted to engage with other communities that didn't know better. And that's a lot, that's a lot of the reason why we've made such good progress. The really fun thing is I think we're just scraping the surface. So things like, as we were discussing at lunch with a small group of you, the transition from what we're doing now to aerofoil flight, that's the next frontier, and that's already coming in the next few weeks. Again, I don't think we'll be putting that on YouTube anytime soon, but that's what we're experimenting with. So you rise up, you fly around, and actually as you start to get forward momentum, you can get airflow over a wing surface and you can generate aerofoil lift rather than in this terribly inefficient way. It's about 4 litres of fuel a minute consumption at the moment, which is pretty inefficient. So there's lots of stuff coming. This has now grown up into a quite serious aeronautical innovation business. We announced only last week quite a decent funding deal that I accidentally signed on a $100 bill in the middle of a San Francisco car park on the way to do TED. It's been that kind of business. And we're just going all over the world doing kind of ever more audacious, hopefully safe flight demonstrations. There's even a TV thing we're now working on with a bunch of development people in LA. All sorts of things going on. I'm mindful of the time, and I prefer, especially with this audience, to kind of throw it out there to questions, because I'm sure you technically minded crowd have got lots of things you might be interested to ask. And now I've said that, no one will put their hand up.
I mean, the limitations of not being able to be hands-free to do anything else with your hands other than fly.
Yeah, so I mean, the positive of using your arms is that you don't, this is the gyro in the ECU. These are the actuators and the flight control surfaces, if you like. So the benefit is you've already got them, and they don't have any more weight, and they're not as fallible as control systems or whatever. You're right, there is a disadvantage. You can't then do anything with your hands. However, the obvious evolution of this, and we're even starting to get into a supportive structure to take some of the load, the obvious evolution is that gradually these become sort of little like T-Rex arms that actually start doing gentle balancing and control and do leave your hands free. But interestingly, with some of the more interesting folks who fly around needing their hands for something, we've already uncovered a whole load of use cases with the US SOCOM guys that I'm demonstrating for them in August. So actually just the maneuverability and ability to move around in three-dimensional space is still such a win for them that they don't mind that momentarily you haven't got your hands free. But yeah, it would be ideal, but it's certainly a sacrifice that's worth it for us at the moment because of that control. Yeah, other...
surely this isn't possible without these small jet gas turbine engines. What were they originally designed for? Because they're very small.
Yeah, no, certainly they weren't designed for this, that's for sure. There's been a big breakthrough in the last 5 years with the electronic control systems of these micro gas turbines. That's been key to this. It used to be that you blow hot air in one end or just blow air in one end and then inject LPG and stabilize it over about 5 minutes. Trying to do that with 5 or originally 6 engines is impossible. So they go from cold to ready to go full power in 90 seconds or so, and the big one on my back now goes even quicker. They were originally meant for either the smaller variety, even smaller than one I've got. They go down to tiny kind of loo roll size ones, amazing. They're meant for model aircraft, very high-end model aircraft, and as the model aircraft application drops off as they get bigger, you then get to military gunnery target drones. So not the drone you use for doing spying and photography, a drone that you want to go and chase after in your F-16 and shoot down with your guns or your missiles. It needs to be fast and light and relatively cheap. That's what they're mostly meant for.
How do you control the thrust output of the engines?
Yeah, so I've got a trigger in each arm. So the right-hand trigger does the arms, and the left-hand trigger does the rear engine, just to give me a bit of kind of differential control. But really, it's a question. Again, you'll see if it all works well this afternoon. You'll see how we fly this. You can't spool the engines up and down fast enough. In fact, you can't spool any engine up and down fast enough, I don't think. Maybe not even your electric motors, I don't know. You've got an inertial thing, obviously. You can't spool them up and down fast enough to achieve the balance, the fine control. So actually it's vectors. It's GCSE, not high school, they don't have to say high school, GCSE vectors, or key stage, whatever it is. So if I want to go up, I just point them down. If I want to go down, I point them out again, and etc. So it's a question of presetting the thrust to something that I think is about right. And I should, when the heads-up display is running properly, I should see what that is in my heads-up display, and then just bite off chunks of that from a vertical component point of view. So they're kind of big hammer drill triggers in effect, and you just preset that throttle. Have I ever got out of ground effect into proper flight? There's no ground effect. If there was a wing surface and it was flying along, you'd create a ground effect cushion. I'm just throwing air downwards. The fact that it hits the ground doesn't affect me, apart from it creates a god-awful amount of turbulence and it makes it harder flying on the ground. It's much easier the higher you go. This can go thousands of feet and hundreds of miles an hour, but obviously we don't do that until we've managed to cover off some of the issues if you get an engine failure. Above 150 feet, base jumping chute will sort you out. Below 150 feet and above about 10 feet, or as high as you dare go, that's the problem zone. That's what we're working on. If we can crack that, then the display becomes a whole different kettle of fish. But there's no ground effect. There will be when we've got an aerofoil.
How high have you gone?
How high have I gone? About 30 feet or so. I'm happier above grass. I haven't flown above water very much, only because actually I'd be really disappointed if I went in the water and wrote all my kit off. I make a lot of steam very quickly as well. I've accidentally gone above concrete about 30 feet, but that was only in a stadium arena thing, because they shine really bright lights, which they didn't turn on during the rehearsal, but they did in the live thing, and it was a bit like bringing down a Second World War bomber. In my visor, it just lit up and glowed, and I couldn't see a thing. So I carried on doing the display, thinking I really don't want to feel that awful dragging of my feet on the ground and look really lame. So I gave it a bit more power, carried on doing the display, turned to go back towards the stage, and the stage was about 30 feet below me and about another 50 yards away from me. This system doesn't reward panic, I have to say. I've got my thumb on top of an electrical kill switch, which was a great idea in the early days, but I'm increasingly convinced it's not now, because if I slide my thumb off that, everything electrically shuts down. Which is great if you fall over, everything shuts off. But actually, I'm sitting 20, 30 feet up in the air. If I just slip off that, it's I should just cover off quickly on the safety point. It's diesel, kerosene, jet fuel. It's not gasoline. It doesn't form a vapor cloud. You have got that electrical cutoff switch. I wear this fireproof stuff. I've always got a safety crew around me with CO2 fire extinguishers. I liken this to a high-end sports bike, right? I mean, if you're going hooning it around the lanes and you hit a slippery patch and you slide into a hedge or a wall or something, that's going to do a lot more damage than what I'm doing. I don't want to tempt fate here. The worst I'm potentially encountering is falling badly and, you know, breaking a collarbone or a wrist or something. It looks and sounds outrageous, but it's not. And when you deconstruct it, it's not actually as bad as it as you'll think if we get this flying in a minute. Yeah, so there's a whole bunch of different avenues that have all sprung up with this. Again, I go back to we just did this for fun, and it's having now demonstrated what we can do. There's all these, you know, interesting applications emerged. I mean, the most frivolous one is, you know, the jet ski equivalent in the air. What's the point of a jet ski? It's got very little practical use. It's just cool fun, and there's a whole industry around that. So I'll happily take that. Then there is, you know, as we said, our friends that need their hands for various other activities. That's suddenly grown into quite a big thing. And again, I'm glad I'm not building a business model waiting for that funding, because, you know, that'll take an ice age, but that's fun to explore. And then there's quite a serious angle. Again, I don't want to claim that we're ready yet, but you never know with the way technology evolves. But short hop CASEVAC, search and rescue, even that awful event in London, you know, one of the terrorism events where the police were very, you know, proud of getting there in 8 minutes, 11 minutes. You can join the dots with that. I think you could move people around a lot quicker with this if you had to. All this sort of short hop, pretty expensive way of getting a human being from A to B and not caring what's happened to the roads, or, you know, like earthquake damage or whatever. I don't know. But again, I'll back away from that and just say, look, this is a joy-fueled exploration into something that 18 months ago was considered impossible. I'm happy to kind of, that's my baseline.
How do you get it on an aeroplane?
Yeah, how do I get on an aeroplane? If you'd asked me 72 hours ago, I would have said I've had no problems at all. It's been fine. Yeah, so actually, if you defuel it, if you get a nice letter from British Airways to say, honestly, the turbine oil is fine, and the lithium batteries that I use to start it are fine and in my hand luggage, it's all right. There's no real rules to say you can't have jet engines either in your check-in or in your hand luggage. I've had them in my hand luggage, and they look at them like, yeah, you shouldn't be allowed this, but there's nothing in the book. So, so it's been fine. Unfortunately, the demonstration I did in Germany, which was the last one, we did run kerosene or jet fuel, Jet A1, and it stinks. Jet fuel's got this horrible aromatics component, and the airport security people smelt it, opened the lid, and said, no, that's not coming back. So that had to be UPS'd in a hurry to be able to do this. It's not too bad, and it gets down into 2 suitcases. It's you know, quite compact. The whole idea was to make it really compact and small. I mean, it's even fueled up, it's only 45 kilos or so. It's pretty, it must be breaking some record in terms of human flight in the sense of its size and weight. I hadn't thought about that before. I should look that up. How much strain is it on my body? Quite a bit. I've got very used to it, though. And again, back to my starting hypothesis, it's amazing what the human body can get used to. I am not consciously aware at all of what my arms are doing or the strain or anything. But on paper, each engine is pushing with 22 kilos, so 44 kilos of thrust through each arm. But it's a bit like doing a dip or a ring dip for any, you know, kind of CrossFit type enthusiast. Yeah, I can't do it forever, but it's not too bad. It's mostly down to your own body weight is how I like to think of it. The rear engine is doing a good amount of work lifting my kit at the back, so it's mostly manipulating your body weight. It's not too bad. Yes?
Yeah, do you have to interact and liaise with air traffic control at all?
Do I have to interact with air traffic control? Something's gone really wrong if I am interacting with air traffic control. No, because of the sort of 30 feet thing at most, and I won't do that today, hopefully. No, we did engage with the Civil Aviation Authority, who just said they were very busy. How much did I weigh with the kit? I said, well, 120 odd kilos or so. And they said, oh, good, because if you're under 150 kilos, then you're not an aeroplane and you can leave now, sort of thing. That was the... But I don't think that's really good enough. We want to be around the table, and we're doing this in the US as well with the authorities, because a bit like what's happened with drones, you know, no one made the rules up, everybody abused them, and now there's draconian rules coming in. There is going to be more and more, you know, examples of this kind of behavior in the skies in the next few years, and it'd be nice to get ahead of the inevitable, you know, rule set. But no, at the moment, it's just the authorities haven't thought about this much. So no. I can quickly list through the small, unusual crowd of us. So there's the original 1984, I think it was, in the LA Olympics, where the guy flew in and landed in 90 seconds. That was a proper oxidizer and propellant nightmare. I don't know who signed off that on health and safety in front of 1 billion people, but fair play to them. Then since then, there wasn't very much. Then some years after that, there was guys using sort of jet engines, a couple of big jet engines and a jetpack equivalent. There's a guy called David Mayman in California who I know who's still progressing that. For some reason, that doesn't seem to spark the same same imagination, and you're quite restricted. You're just in an armchair that lifts up. I mean, it's still cool, but it's a bit more limited. Yves Rossi, again, I know him. He's the guy who jumped out of airplanes or helicopters, lights up the engines, and with a delta wing full of fuel, flies around. He's kind of top down because he has to pull a chute when he's done and then land with a parachute. I'm kind of bottom up. We want to meet in the middle eventually. Then there's a crazy French guy called Frankie Zapta. He's the guy on the hoverboard thing. That's properly bonkers, and I think he might possibly come to bad end soon because he's going very high and very fast, and there's nothing other than his own balance standing on 4 jet engines, which if you try and balance a pool cue on your hand, you can get an idea of the fact that wants to be upside down. It was thought for a while he had a load of clever gimbals and gyros, but he hasn't. He tried to do I know his engine manufacturer, and it was a bit of a secret to begin with, and he tried to do a deal with the US military until they literally lifted the lid and went, oh, it's just 4 jet engines. And he actually pioneered the whole water system, the people flying around with, a jet ski with a hose pipe and that thing. So his balance is awesome. I mean, he spent, I think, 300 hours learning the water system, and then he bought a crane, and then another 50 hours learning with the jet thing. So again, full marks to him for creativity, but trying to do much more with that, that's pretty tough. And I wouldn't like to be having 1,000 horsepower strapped to my legs. I think they might come off if I have an accident.
Is there anything else in the system that currently prevents you from going beyond?
No, not
nothing
at all.
Is there any plans as you're looking towards moving into a potentially more commercial type venture to put something in place to ensure the system is more limited in terms of height and speed?
The easiest is a block of concrete and a chain. That'll be what I use for some of these people that are actually wanting to try this. No, not really. I mean, it defaults to down, yeah? Even if you lose one arm engine, it just spins around and you just fall on the ground again. You don't suddenly go careering off kind of Ironman style into a wall or whatever. It just can't really do that. You just lose stability and drop. I guess if you panic and froze, you could just pull both triggers full on, do that, and you'd be up 1,000 feet in a few minutes. I'm just not going to do that. I mean, that's my answer. And I prefer to trust this than a little box that's ground, pinging the radar, radar pinging the ground and going to step in and cut my... Because if that screws up, it's probably more dangerous than me just not doing that. So, yeah, if this became in any shape a larger market than a small number of people, then yeah, you probably need some sort of proximity cutoff thing. I'm just very wary of making this over complex because it gets kind of dangerous, more dangerous. Yeah.
What did your parents say when you told them what you were going to do?
Yeah. Well, my late father, so he would have loved this. As I've said in the TED Talk, he was an eccentric inventor and somewhat, passionate about flight and engineering. He would have loved this stuff. My mother, yeah, I didn't really tell her much about it for a long time. I think she's seen me grow up and go and take on slightly insane challenges. So yeah, I don't think it came as a huge surprise. I don't think she minds. She's been quite proud, I think, with the amount of outreach we've had from the world. I mean, this hit 60 million views in 4 days of launching it. We're 3.5 months in from revealing this, and it's now a really well-funded large company with TV deals. And I mean, I'll give you an example. I went to the Cannes Lions Creative Festival thing. I got invited there, and I went there, and I just walked into the Chinese Marketing Association booth. And they were all sitting there, not really engaging with anybody on their phones. And I walked in and just said, how does this work and whatever. And they asked me where I was from, and I showed them the clip, and they all dropped their stuff and started taking selfies. Apparently, I'd be massive on Chinese state news. I mean, go figure. Everywhere around the world, I keep getting sent pictures of newspaper cuttings of this guy in black flying around. So it's kind of cool. Everybody seems to find it quite fun. And most people haven't seen what, again, you'll hopefully see shortly, and the weather's looking much better. It does have a big impact on people. I mean, you've got a jet engine knocking around your office, so that's several. So it won't be quite as shocking to you guys, but it is fun how this does seem to inspire in people almost a childlike dropping momentarily of the boundaries and confines of that you grow up with as you become an adult. So yeah, I think she's quite proud of it now, my mum.